more color, more power. The exciting chase of a lifetime is on. Finish painting roads before the monsters stop you. Grab those amusing, pesky Erksters. So okay, the tagline gives away as little of the game's gimmick as does the rather ambiguous title, but what we essentially have here is a single-screen arcade-style ground coverer, as I like to call them. The sort of thing very much like Pac-Man and games of that ilk that demand you cover every inch of a maze of some kind while trying to flee monsters. The screens wrap around in such a way that you can leave a passage at the top of the screen and reappear at the bottom. Or, similarly, left to right. Here you're not trying to collect pellets, but the principle is the same. Your task is to paint by walking over every tile on these road maps and not get caught by the enemies. So by that token, it's probably more akin to Painter Momopai, a Japanese exclusive Game Boy game, although without the weapons you could use in that one. The first game to use the name Crush Roller came about as far back as 1981 in Japan and Europe. For those of you stateside who are connoisseurs of that early 80s arcade style of game, you might recognize this as being called Make Trax. It's the same game essentially. There aren't power pellets or the equivalent here, so no way to actually attack the enemies, save one. You might see a paint roller on a longer straight of road. If you touch that from behind, it'll carry you quickly to the end of the straight. Should you run over a monster, it'll kill it and send it temporarily back to its spawn point for a little while. The monsters don't seem to actually intelligently chase you directly, as they'll often take a different turn to you, even if seemingly following behind. It must be a random choice every time they come to an intersection which path they'll move down, so at least there's no devious AI between the two of them whereby they corner you and cut off all your escape routes. This'll still happen sometimes though, don't get me wrong. Don't think that this makes them easier to avoid, though, because while one of them moves at the same speed as you, the other one is actually faster. Getting caught on a long piece of road without a choice of turns is dangerous, as with the quicker one on your tail, you don't have an escape option. As well as the two malignant enemies, there's a different critter hiding somewhere in the grid. Should you paint part of the road adjacent to where it's hiding, it'll pop out with a hello and meander around the roads for a bit. It'll stamp footprints into any paint you've laid, meaning you'll need to recover that ground. But if you can catch it before it disappears, you'll earn an extra life once the level is complete. You might get to a point on a stage where it seems you've painted everywhere, but the level isn't ending. What's probably happened here is that you've turned a corner somewhere and left a tiny little pixel or two uncovered in doing so. It can be hard to search for it while you're being hunted, so it's worth being thorough as you go. When you do manage to cover the whole road area, you'll move on and actually get a choice of levels. For example, you can press left, up, or right in between levels to pick where you want to go, although you don't get a preview of the upcoming stage, so I don't know what the point in it is necessarily. You'll go through 5 banks, if you like, of levels, whereby the first is always the same. You get a choice of 3 for stage 2, which in turn branch off to 6 potential stage 3s, 7 4s and 8 5s. However, it all culminates in the same final level, 6-1. I suppose you'll learn which your favourites are. You get 3 lives to start with, but Infinite Continues will let you get through the whole thing if you're not bothered about one CCing it. Controls are really responsive, which is a massive plus point in games like this. If you need to desperately dart down a different path, you can do. You're really only limited by your own reflexes. Thankfully, there are only ever 2 enemies on screen, but with the speed everything moves, this is more than enough to handle. Graphically, this isn't the peak of what the Neo Geo Pocket Color was capable of, but neither is it super primitive or anything. The cityscapes look kinda nice, although possibly some of the color choices could have been more interesting. The intro and in-between levels look very good actually. Audibly, it's very middle of the road for this console, which is to say, it's not really an area where the Neo Geo shines all that much anyway. Not irritating, you honestly won't really notice the music. The limited collection of sound effects you get are pretty good. If you get through the main game, you can go through a time trial, which gives you a time limit to beat the levels as well, to ramp up the challenge. As a simple arcade conversion, this is a thoroughly competent little game that's sure to keep you entertained for a short while.